This is the final video in our series about getting XBRL into Excel using Power Query. Now, in our last video, we looked at how we could use a query to be able to bring in a dynamic variable to our main web request query. And in the one before that, what we did was we saw how we could do that directly. But that's a slightly messier solution. So that's the reason why we went for the put it in a separate query route. Now, one of the advantages of putting in a separate query is we can then turn that query into a function, which just gives us even more power and makes the whole thing even neater. But before we go any further with all of that, you may have noticed that there is this little message here saying download did not complete. And the reason for that is that since this video and the last, I've changed the privacy settings. And those privacy settings can affect things. And the default settings, let's go and have a look actually. Let's edit this query, and we're not going to edit it, but it does take us into the query editor, which means we can then change our general options for the Power Queries. So if we go to File, which you may not see, it's slightly out of shot, but as you can see, it gives us our options and settings, and we go to Query Options, and in a minute they will appear. And we go to privacy, you will see that there are various options, and the strictest ones are those up there. And with those strictest options applied, you may get unexpected results. You may find you're trying to do something and suddenly it says stop. You can't do that. And when you're experimenting and trying things for the first time, that is just rather annoying. So what you might want to do is to set them to always ignore privacy level settings. And the reason I mention it here is one, that you may have tried what we showed you in the last two videos and found you couldn't do it because you hit these privacy level issues and you may not have solved them. So this is how you do it. And secondly, if you put your query, your secondary query, as we have used in this case and we'll be using again in a minute, in a function, then these privacy level warnings go away. So it's just another advantage of using these good old functions. So we're going to solve that by clicking on that, and that will fix that. Let's go back to Excel proper. You still got this message. That's because the query hasn't refreshed. When we refresh it, it will disappear. Trust me on that. Right, so let's go to our variables. So far, we have control over this web request by changing the token and being able to change the ticker so we can bring down a completely different company. But we may want to bring down different years. At the moment, it uses the default because we haven't specified anything else in the web request. It will bring back the latest, but we might want to see other years. So let's gain some control over what year it brings down by supplying a particular year. We'll use the latest one for now, why not? And as you can see, we specify it with year, month, day. Let's give our variable a title. Again, we will call it, rather surprisingly, a year. And we will then turn it into a table very quickly, just select it and then insert table, and let's press the right button, shall we? It has a header row, which is fabulous, so it will go away and create a table immediately. We need to give it a useful name, and I will call it years, and I'm doing that rather than year for a reason, as you will see a little bit later. Right, so now we have our table. Now, what we did previously was we referenced this table by turning it into a query, and we did that just like we created the original query by going to our data, get and transform, and creating a whole new query. But we don't need to do that because every so often Microsoft comes up with these clever little shortcuts that enables us to do things a little bit more quickly. So if we take this query here, which is in terms of functionality is exactly what we want for our existing table, certainly to start with. What we can do is take that functionality and copy it. So if we just go, I'll just show you, you can copy it. There we go. Click on copy, and then I'm going to paste it using my, actually I'm going to right click to get it down. And we now have a copy which we can go away and edit. We can either double click or we can use that other menu as you saw I just did then. So we're in here, and as you can see we need to make some changes because it's referencing a column that doesn't exist in our new table. It's called token, but we haven't got to just change this line, we've got to change the other line, and we can do it one line at a time within the editor, or we can take a deep breath and dive straight into the advanced editor. Which is, well, we might as well, because we're going to have to do that anyway to turn it into a function. And it's not quite as scary as it may seem. So let's do that. We access it via the Home tab. We go in there and we look for the advanced editor, which is there. And as you can see, we've got these two lines which follow the steps that you would have seen in the other editor screen. So, you know, it's not too unfamiliar. And you just got this let and in thing going on as well. But you don't need to worry too much about that at this stage. So we can make our changes because we're going to reference a different table. We are referencing our years table. And we are referencing a different column, which is called year. So we need to change those two references. And remember, we specify a particular cell that we access. So once we've done that, I'll click on done, and it will access that value. There you go. So as you can see, we now have rebuilt the query to access a completely different variable. So yeah, we're set up there. Now, what we want to do, as I said, is to take it one step further and turn this into a function. So to do that, we need to go back into our advanced editor, and we need to add a couple of lines, 2 lines, that's all we have to do. So we start this next line with the word let, and then we name our function, not quite, I almost said query, function, and that is going to be called, we can call it exactly the same name as we called our query, although we haven't yet. We will call it years. And the next thing we do is we need to put in an equals sign, and then we have to put in these brackets, which is basically what makes it a function. And in those brackets, we can pass it variables, which is a rather useful thing to be able to do. And we will do that shortly. But let's just keep it simple, not overcomplicate things to start with. And the other things we have to add, we have to put in an equals, not a plus, we have to put in equals and a arrow. Don't ask me why, but you do. And it's just the syntax for functions in Power M, and then we have to put in another in, and that in just needs to have the name of the function. And now we have, rather than a query, we have a function, and if it works, it will do something a bit different, which it does now, because it's asking for parameters and giving you the option to invoke it. But before we do that, I realised I haven't actually changed the name. It hasn't got a handy name at all at the moment, so let's call it years to match the name I actually gave it in the editor. And so that's done. And what we will do is we will invoke it, because this is the way that you use functions if you then want to access the data they provide within Excel. It will, by invoking it, it will create a table which can then be placed somewhere in one of your sheets. So let's just do that. And did I press on the wrong button? No, I must have done. There we go. And as you can see, it's brought down, it's returned the value that we'd hope that it would return, which is fantastic, just as it was doing in the query. And it's created a new query called an invoke function, which we've just done so that we could check that it's working, but we don't want that. So let's get rid of that, or we'll just have to click on delete and it will go away. Maybe it wasn't highlighted, now it is highlighted, and it will delete it. If we don't delete those functions, what will happen? When we close the editor, it will start throwing them all over Excel, which we'll then have to get rid of, which is a little bit irritating. So, yeah, if you're not going to use them, just get rid of them straight away. Right, so yeah, we have this function which we can now use in our main query. So if we go to our main query, and once again, I know previously we hadn't strayed into the advanced editor, but we've gone in there now. We've seen it's not quite as scary as maybe we thought it might be. So let's go back to the advanced editor and do that via the advanced editor rather than via one of the steps. So here we have our web request, and we need to add to that. So what we need to do is we need to add a bit of string to that because we need to specify the static bit of our new parameter. Our new parameter in a XBRL XL web request is for a date, which we use the term dat. All of our parameters are free letters just to keep everything consistent and maybe potentially more memorable. So we've done that, and we need to put an equal sign in. Oh, and we have forgotten something because also within the web request itself, each parameter is separated with an ampersand. So we need to make sure we got that, otherwise it will not work. So that's that, and we then need to add our new dynamic variable, which we are accessing via a function, and that function is called years, and we need to specify that it's a function. So again, we put these brackets in, which is the whole function thing, and I think that should work. Well, we'll find out in a minute. It's going to go away and do something, and it will either complain or it won't. Tell you what, let's go to the source stage. So, and I just make sure it's working. I'm going to request a refresh. I think it's fine because it hasn't complained, but I just want to make absolutely sure. Yep, that's fine. So it's doing it, which is good. So yeah, let's go out and see the results. The results shouldn't be any different because we're using the latest year, which is what the default anyway. But let's do that, and then we can start to have a bit more fun. So we've used our newly created function to bring back the latest year. Now, we probably want to bring back years other than the latest year, and that is exactly what we do in our XSheet product. We bring back a succession of years in different sheets, and we use a function which can call different years to do that. So that's what we're going to do here. So say, for example, we want to pull back the previous year, so we'll put that in here below our other one. And if I just move away from that table, you will see another little bit of Excel magic. You'll see it's automatically expanded the table to include our new year. And the magic doesn't stop there, because if we use the fill feature, it automatically knows we're going down 1 year at a time. So if we increase it another year, it will bring us back the year after that and expand the table all at the same time. And we can go even further if we want to. We could, for example, go all the way back to 5 years, just make sure I'm on the right thing so it does it right. Yep, and there we go, we're back to 2014. And because we have a function, we can potentially change that function to pick any one of those years. And in order to do that, we need to edit our function slightly, which is what we are going to do now. We're going to choose the edit option, and this will take us into our function. We need to go to the advanced editor, and if you remember, I said these brackets here were very important because this is where we can specify parameters. So we can add a parameter. So for example, let's add the year number to specify which particular one of our series we want to use, and then we need to tell it what sort it is, its type, and it's a number rather than text, for example. And then we can take that parameter variable that we have created in the header and insert it instead of one of our static values. Now, before we were using 0 to pull back always the first cell. Well, if we put this in here, and remember that this table is 0 based, we need to adjust for that because when we want to bring back year 1, it's actually going to bring back year 0. So we need to take 1 off if we want to get the right year. So we've made that adjustment, and that is our function updated to include a parameter, and we will see that in a minute because it will give us the option to include a parameter when we invoke it. But we don't want to do that because we want to use it directly in our main query. So all we need to do is pass to our main query, and then we can start to take control of which years get downloaded in our web request. So let's go to the advanced editor again, and we can specify that we want a different year. So if we put 1, we'll get the latest year. If we put 2, we'll get the year before that. So we'll pop that in there, and with a bit of luck, why is it having a complaint? It's not having a complaint. That's good. Oh yeah, so it was only complaining because we'd suddenly changed the function to a function which required a parameter. So it's gone back and got data for the previous year, and so let's just come out of there just to prove all this has really happened. So yeah, we've used a parameter now to specify a particular year. So we can specify any of these years by just saying it's either the first year or second year in our table series. And as you can see, it's pulling back the table over here. And as you may have noticed, it's bringing back a different number of rows. And that's because we're looking at a different year. So that's how you do it. You have 3 choices. You can either use a function that gives you even greater power over what comes back, or you can use a query, or you can, as we did with the ticker, you can write that dynamic variable directly into the main query by specifying the first cell in that table.